This episode of Distraction is sponsored by Omega Bright CBD, formulated by Omega Bright Wellness, creators of the #1 omega-3 supplements for the past 20 years. Omega Bright CBD, safe, third-party tested, and it works. Shop online at omegabrightwellness.com.
The college experience next year is going to be very, very different. And I don't know what you think, Ned, but I don't think it's going to be very conducive to people with ADHD. Online is really, really tough for folks to do.
Hello, and welcome to Distraction. I'm your host, Dr. Ned Hallowell. Today, we have a guest who's been on the show before, a guest whom we love and adore, who is an amazing entrepreneur himself, and along with his partner, Tom Bergeron. No, not that Tom Bergeron, but another Tom Bergeron. Some years ago, founded Inventive Labs in Amesbury, Massachusetts, an amazing place that takes kids and some older folks who are entrepreneurial but don't want to go to school or can't go to school or have tried school and found they're allergic to it. They go up to Inventive Labs and they find a place, an incubator, if you will, where they can share with other inventives, as they're called rather than students, other inventives, and learn how to develop and start a business or build a boat or design a dress or whatever might be the entrepreneurial creative outlet that they've found for themselves. It's an amazing place, an incredible place, and we are thrilled to welcome its co-founder, Mr. Rick Fiery, aptly named because he is indeed a fiery man. And he's here to not only talk about Inventive Labs, but an idea that he has related to what he's seen during the pandemic. So without further ado, let me welcome my friend and colleague, Mr. Rick Fiery.
Well, thanks, Ned. As always, it's amazing to talk to you and kind of share some stories and have a conversation. And that's what I was kind of hoping to do today. I would add that, we did start out as entrepreneurship as kind of a thing that we wanted to help people with. And that was probably, it's hard to believe, it's about seven years ago that we started. And we've also morphed quite a bit. We've listened to what people have wanted, and we've added probably about 5 years ago what we call kind of career prep and gap year programs as well, because we felt that, we saw that people really wanted to start a business potentially, but they also realized pretty quickly that they needed to gain some more knowledge and maybe get some industry experience in a field before they jumped into the entrepreneurship group. So like good entrepreneurs, we listened to our customers and we pivoted and we've expanded and added those programs about 5 years ago. So I think that's an important component to what we do. In fact, those programs have turned out to be very, very popular with people to where we have probably, interestingly enough, we probably have more people enrolled in gap year and career prep than entrepreneurship right now. That may change, though, with the latest shift in the economy.
What about your idea related to what people have learned from distance learning?
Well, I think what has happened, interestingly, I think in the world, quite frankly, the whole world right now is on pause for a number of different reasons. And a lot of people, when they're considering college, we kind of believe, especially with people with ADHD, they really need to know why they're going to college. I would say that, the number one question that ADHDers ask is always why. Why do I need to do this? Why do I need to study English literature if I'm going to be an engineer? That was my question when I was at college. Why do I need to do this? What am I going to get from it if I put forth this effort? What we've tried to focus on with people is really identifying their strengths, identifying their weaknesses, and then based on their strengths and weaknesses, pick a career direction first. I think, when I was younger, people didn't ask me where I was going to go to college. They asked me what I was going to do for my life, what I was going to do for a career. And then once you knew that, then you pick the college. I think right now it's kind of a race to pick the best possible college so people can potentially brag about it to their friends at a cocktail party. And I think it's gotten backwards. So from our perspective, people have struggled in the past to take a gap year, but they've struggled in the past because they think they're going to fall behind. That's been the number one reason that people have said, hey, I'm not really comfortable doing this. I'm going to fall behind. And our point right now with everything that's going on with the pandemic, et cetera, the college experience next year is going to be very, very different. And I don't know what you think, Ned, but I don't think it's going to be very conducive to people with ADHD. Online is really, really tough for folks to do. And we've seen that firsthand. We went online partly for our program, and it worked, but it was very different. It was a different kind of experience. And for online in the colleges going forward, it's going to be an extremely difficult environment for people with ADHD. So kind of our point is, if there was ever a time to take, not a gap year, but what I would call it a focus year, where you can focus on yourself, identify your strengths and weaknesses, and take a break and figure out where you're aiming before you go marching off to college or marching into a career, and get it right. And you're going to save a lot of time, frustration, potentially failure, and many other bad things from happening if you just hit the pause button for a second. So the thing that has struck us is that, if ever there was a time to do it, now you have a great reason to do it. And there's no reason to go marching off to college this fall or even next spring with the way the environment is going to be for folks.
Yeah, I think the experiment in distance learning using Zoom and other tools has really taught us how much better live and in-person education is, not just for people with ADHD, for everyone. Mm-hmm. I think the experiment has largely failed. And, I have I'm doing all my seeing of patients over Zoom now, and that's a perfectly acceptable replacement. But I'm not teaching a course, nor am I trying to learn physics or chemistry or English literature for that matter. It's really difficult for people to both teach and learn. I've talked to teachers about this, many teachers, and I've talked to many parents, and I've talked to many frustrated students. I haven't heard one person say, oh, this is really great. Not one. I've heard people say, I'm glad they're able to continue the educational process in some way, but it's always followed by, I can't wait to get back to live and in-person schooling. I think drives home the point I've always made about the importance of connection. And in-person human connection is the best. Virtual electronic connection is okay, but it just isn't the same thing. And certainly for folks with dyslexia and ADHD, both of which I have, it would just be torture. It would be a real exercise in going backwards to head off to school in September with the expectation of doing online courses. And I think you're so right to say this is a perfect time. And it's not a pause. You say hit the pause button. You're not pausing. You're just redirecting. You're saying what is being offered won't work for me. It will be torture. It will make me hate what I'm studying and hate school and hate life and turn me into a very miserable human being. So why in the world would I want to do that when I can redirect to something else? Inventive Labs is one distinct possibility, but there are so many others. Travel, get a job, look into areas of life that you've never seen before, explore your city, your region, your family, your ethnicity. I mean, you could really do the equivalent of a Montessori education, which is follow your curiosity. So I'm with you 100%, 1,000%. And I think this is the ideal time to redirect, rather than paying a huge tuition for at best, second-rate experience in college if you're having to do it online.
Exactly. And honestly, I think if you look at the college experience for most people, at least for me when I look back at mine, the big part, academics was certainly part of it, but a big part of it was social growth. I was totally introverted and shy and terrified about public speaking and getting up in front of people and doing presentations. Yeah. And I didn't have a whole lot of friends in high school, but I got to college and socially I was able to blossom. And in the fall, those opportunities aren't going to be there. There isn't going to be the team sports. There isn't going to be intramurals. There isn't going to be fraternity rush. There isn't going to be sorority rush. There isn't going to be the ability to exercise. There isn't going to be the ability to isolate and study in a private area in a library. And it's just going to be a very difficult environment. Plus, accommodations are going to be even harder to come by because the classes will be recorded, which is nice, but note-taking is still a challenge. And extra time is going to have to be negotiated. I've seen that with some of the folks that we work with trying to get that done in an online environment. And it just adds to the level of difficulty and stress and anxiety. And there's enough of that in the world right now. So from our perspective, it's a golden opportunity. Like to say, the time is right to find your focus, to find your drive, to find a direction that you want to head that you can get excited about. And if you can do that, then the chances of you being successful academically or in a career that you choose, or if you can decide to start up a business right now in the middle of all this, the chances of success are just much, much higher. So we're frustrated in seeing that some folks are just saying, yeah, I'm going to go back to college in the fall. And what we've heard from many of them is, for 20% or so, it's going to be an in-person experience if they have things like labs or things that require hands-on. And for the rest, it's going to be an online experience. And that just doesn't make a lot of sense to us right now. So that's why we're kind of waving the flag. And we're seeing some people send some folks off with ADHD for their very first college experience in this kind of an environment. And it just seems like the wrong thing to do right now.
I'd like to take a few moments to talk with you about Omega Bright CBD, a supplement created by Omega Bright Wellness, one of our wonderful sponsors of Distraction. After 20 years of leading the industry in omega-3s, Omega Bright is now bringing those same processes to the busy and noisy world of CBD. Omega Bright and Dr. Carol Locke, who created the whole thing, have set the standards for purity, safety, and efficacy, and that matters a lot because the world of CBD is like the Wild West these days. Omega Bright CBD is organically grown, research-driven, and the same commitment given to it and excellence as their omega-3 supplements, which are the best around. I myself have been taking the CBD supplement for a couple of months now, and it's worked wonderfully to help me with my sort of impatient reactivity. Get Omega Bright CBD online at omegabrightwellness.com. That's OMEGABRITE wellness.com, omegabrightwellness.com. When I was in college, I went to Harvard, and I took off the year between junior and senior year. And I worked during the summer on Cape Cod. I lived on Cape Cod as a tutor during the daytime. I'd tutor high school kids in English and math. And then in the evening, I worked as a waiter at a famous restaurant in Chatham called Pate's. And I learned how to carry trays on one hand, these huge trays that have 6 orders of lobster on platters. I got so I could walk around the restaurant full tilt, holding this huge tray with only one hand and negotiating corners and then putting down the tray stand and putting the tray on it and serving it, and many wonderful experiences as a waiter. It was a wonderful summer. I'll never forget the customer. We would put the salad dressing on their salads. They could either get a Caesar salad or a tossed salad, and for the tossed salads, we offered dressings. And this one diner said, "I want you to put the dressing on my head." Well, he'd had a few too many drinks, and I said, I don't think you want me to do that, sir. He said, brought out a $100 bill, and he said, how about if I give you this? And I needed the money. So I said, okay, if you really want me to. So I put a big dollop of Russian dressing on his head. And those were the whole table laughed, the restaurant laughed. It was all, so the summer experience was very worth it. And then for the rest of the year, I went to London, and I'd gotten some references from my tutor in college, William Alford, who had friends over there. And my friend John Galassi was doing a fellowship over there, and I met this wonderful poet named Judith Thurman, who now writes for The New Yorker and wrote the book that Out of Africa was based on. But I wanted to try my hand at being a writer. And so I started writing and meeting with these people, and I'd saved enough money to not have to get a job over there. And by the end of the summer, I took an interregnum trip down to Greece and took the Orient Express back. And at one point I got off at the wrong train station, and here I was in communist Yugoslavia with no passport. A whole series of things happened. And I fell in love and asked a girl to marry me, and she said no. And in retrospect, turned out she was gay, but hadn't told me that detail. But anyway, it was a wonderful year that taught me so much that I wouldn't have learned had I just gone college straight through. And yes, it's true. When I came back, I was out of step. I didn't graduate with my class. I graduated a year later, but I'm still in the class of 1972. So you don't lose that. And to the extent it did put me out of sync, it did me a great favor, a much greater benefit than any cost associated with it. And I decided that as far as being a writer goes, I ought to have a plan B. and so I thought, because I realized how hard it was to write and make a living. So I went to medical school. That was my plan B. So I am both a doctor and a writer. And having the MD allowed me the freedom, in terms of not having to worry about earning an income, to spend time developing writing, and now I'm just finishing my 21st book. So, but this is the kind of experience a young person can have by taking a year off. You can work, you can explore, you can test out a career, or you could go to Inventive Labs, which I think would just be a bang-up solution for people with ADD. So say more, would you please, Rick, about what a person would find if they went to Inventive Labs?
Well, for us, it's really important, and I think passion is an overused word, but it's really important for us to understand the person and their strengths and weaknesses and build upon that. And we ask people when they come to take some tests, engage with us, do some group brainstorming, and we kind of learn from working with them kind of where they can fit into a work environment, the kind of work environment that they thrive in, the kinds of things that their brain is really good at. And then we collectively kind of brainstorm a bunch of different career paths and career ideas and directions they could go in their life. And then the second phase of that is the important part, which I think you just hit on, which is the launch phase, as we call it. And that's where you really just get out there and try it. You can't Google your way to a career. You can't figure out what it's going to be like to be a computer programmer, writing code 8 to 10 hours a day in a cubicle unless you actually try it and do it. And it sounds glamorous sometimes, but then when the reality hits and the shiny brochure of the career wears off, that can be a real challenge for folks. So the second phase, we take them through a launch process where they get out there and they meet people, they job shadow. Last time we did it online, which worked pretty well. You find that some of the higher-end folks that we wanted to connect with were more willing to engage in Zoom than they were in person, but we've been successful in both. And just meeting and talking to people in the potential field and seeing what it's going to feel like to have that kind of a role and that kind of a position. And then once they do that, then we figure out, okay, well, that's great. Here's what you look like today. What do you need to make yourself look like to have that kind of career and that kind of job? Does it mean that you need a college education? Yes or no? If it does, what college should you attend? What company do you want to work for? Where do they hire from? Where do you need to live? If you want to be a musician, it's probably Nashville or LA, and probably not in Nebraska, where one of a potential inventive that we were talking to was living in that wanted to get into the music industry. So you figure out really what you need to look like. And then the key activities that fall out of that are the things that you need to do. And now hey, I think I'm going to love this career. I'm all in. I want to work for that company. I want to be a performer, or whatever it is they want to do. And now I know why I'm doing all the different things, all the different work activities that I need to do to make myself look like that. So it's really basic stuff, but we kind of say that, you can't just go to college and get the degree and then wave your degree around and expect that people are just going to hire you. You got to make yourself attractive for a particular job or a particular industry. And college is only one piece of that. There's lots of other ways to do it.
So I hope we've enchanted the listeners enough, if they have a child, a son or a daughter, or if they themselves are in school and thinking do I want to take now and give a shot to a redirection, an experimental year trying out life and seeing how it feels? This is an ideal time because distance learning has proven to be not nearly as engaging and fulfilling as actually being on a college campus, attending live classes and going to live parties and going to real football games, whatever. Falling in love with real people, which is hard to do online. And falling in love with real subjects, which is also hard to do online.
Yeah, and it's not just college. I mean, many folks are looking at careers differently now with the changes that have happened in the economy and things like that.
Yeah.
And if, instead of diving back into that same career, there's an opportunity to kind of reset as well.
Absolutely. Well, as always, you have provoked a wonderful conversation. I think your idea is so perfect. I mean, talk about flipping. I've been listening to people complain about how bad it is, and now I'll have a nice idea to offer them instead. Say, well, my friend Rick Fiery points out this would be the ideal time to say, okay, I'll come back to college in a year, but for now, I'm going to create my own learning experience, and one of the things I'll take a look at is Inventive Labs. So, Rick, thank you for joining us.
Thanks, Ned. I think it's been a great conversation, and the point of it is just to get people to think a little bit differently. With great challenges sometimes come great opportunities, and I think right now it's a greatly challenging time on a lot of different levels. And with that comes great opportunities sometimes as well. You just have to look a little bit harder for them.
Yeah, but they're right there. The way we've painted it, it's right there on the horizon. It's right there for the taking.
Yep.
Don't become the subject of negative thinking. That just find that opportunity. And we've described it to you pretty well, I think. As my daughter said to me many years ago, don't hold back on life out of fear. She was only 13 when she said that. I couldn't believe it, but it's such a good line. Well, listen, thanks a million. I know we'll have you on again soon. If you want to learn more about Rick and his wonderful group, go to Inventive Labs, INVENTIVE Labs, LABS.org. That's inventivelabs.org. It's a unique and positively transformational experience for a person of any age, but particularly for people in their late teens, 20s, early 30s. That's it for today. Please reach out to us with your questions and show ideas. We love hearing from you. Love, love, love. Write an email or record a voice memo on your phone and send it to connect@distractionpodcast.com. And again, please be sure to visit inventivelabs.org to learn about Rick Fiery, Tom Bergeron, and the amazing piece of paradise that they've created up there. Distraction is created by Soundscrape Media. Our producer is the beautiful, talented, and wonderfully blessed Sarah Guertin. And our recording engineer and editor is the ever-grumpy, funny, effervescent Pat Keogh. The episode of Distraction you just heard was sponsored by Omega Bright CBD, formulated by Omega Bright Wellness, creators of the #1 omega-3 supplements for the past 20 years. Omega Bright CBD, safe, third-party tested, and it works. Shop online at omegabrightwellness.com.